Welcome, I'm Tatiana Darzi. Chinese companies listed in the stock market don't follow the same accounting standards as U.S. companies. Therefore, NASDAQ announced it will tighten requirements for Chinese businesses hoping to be listed on the U.S. stock exchange. Lack of transparency of Chinese companies came into focus after a major fraud scandal last month.
The American stock exchange NASDAQ is adopting new rules to tighten the requirements for Chinese businesses hoping to debut on its market. The NASDAQ is concerned about Chinese companies' potential ties with powerful insiders and their lack of transparency in accounting. The NASDAQ's move was prompted by Luckin Coffee's recent confession of committing massive sales fraud. Luckin Coffee is a Chinese coffee company founded in October 2017. It opened its first store in Beijing in January 2018 and soon expanded to 1,300 stores in October, turning into one of China's largest coffee chains. It was then listed on NASDAQ in 2019. On April 2, 2020, Luckin Coffee publicly announced that a top company executive and several employees had fabricated its 2019 sales by about 2.2 billion yuan, 310 million USD. Its share price fell over 75% within a single day after announcing its fraudulent sales, resulting in more than $5 billion in investor losses. On May 12, 2020, Luckin Coffee fired its CEO Chen Zhiya and its COO Liu Jian over the sales fraud. Chinese companies listed in the U.S. do not follow the same accounting standards as U.S. companies. This is because the CCP does not allow U.S. regulators to examine audits in Chinese companies, citing national security and state secrecy. However, U.S. President Trump is looking to change that. President Trump said during a Fox News interview on May 14 that the U.S. is looking very strongly at requiring Chinese companies listed in the U.S. to follow standard accounting practices. The NASDAQ is now set to tighten its listing rules. As revealed by Reuters, informed sources said companies hoping to be listed will be required to raise at least $25 million in their initial public offering, or at least a quarter of their post-listing market capitalization. The proposed rules will also require auditing firms to ensure that their international franchises comply with global standards. Moreover, the stock exchange will also inspect small U.S. firms that audit the Chinese companies wanting to join the listing.
President Trump published an open letter on Twitter to Dr. Tedros, the Director General at the WHO, stating that if the WHO doesn't commit to major substantive improvements within 30 days, then the president will make the temporary freeze in funding permanent.
On Monday, May 19th, U.S. President Donald Trump openly published a letter to Director General Dr. Tedros of the WHO on Twitter, condemning the various failures of the organization in response to the pandemic. President Trump wrote, "If the WHO does not commit to major substantive improvements within 30 days, I will make my temporary freeze of the United States funding to the WHO permanent and reconsider our membership in the organization." On the same day, President Trump indicated to reporters that the Chinese Communist Party needs to be responsible for the pandemic and that the World Health Organization is the puppet of China. In the open letter, President Trump stated that the WHO consistently ignored credible reports of the virus spreading in Wuhan in early December 2019, or even earlier. The WHO failed to independently investigate credible reports that conflicted directly with the Chinese government's official accounts. He criticized that the WHO was not willing to share important information with the world due to political reasons. He further mentioned that by no later than December 30, 2019, the WHO office in Beijing knew that there was a major public health concern in Wuhan. Between December 26 and December 30th, Chinese media highlighted evidence of a new virus emerging from Wuhan. During this period, Dr. Zhang Jixian, a doctor from Hubei Provincial Hospital of Integrated Chinese and Western Medicine, told China's health authorities that a new coronavirus was causing a novel disease. By the next day, Taiwanese authorities had communicated information to the WHO indicating human-to-human transmission of a new virus. Yet the WHO chose not to share any of this critical information with the rest of the world, probably for political reasons. The letter also accused Dr. Tedros of many misleading and inaccurate claims, which include that the WHO gratuitously reaffirmed China's claim that the coronavirus could not be transmitted between humans, that he praised the Chinese government for its transparency with respect to the coronavirus, that he belatedly declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern on January 30, 2020, and that he refused a critical team entering China until February 16, 2020. President Trump criticized, saying, "It is clear the repeated missteps by you, Dr. Tedros, and your organization, WHO, in responding to the pandemic have been extremely costly for the world. The only way forward for the World Health Organization is if it can actually demonstrate independence from China." President Trump sent out an ultimatum that if the WHO cannot commit to major substantive improvements within 30 days, he will make this temporary freeze of United States funding to the WHO permanent. On Monday, May 18th, President Trump emphasized in a roundtable conference with restaurant executives and industry leaders that the Chinese Communist Party hurt the world and also China, and should be held accountable for the pandemic.
China should be held responsible for what they've done. They have hurt the world very, very badly. They've hurt themselves also, but they've hurt the world very, very badly. Yeah, they should be held responsible. And again, the United States pays them $450 million a year. China pays them $38 million a year. And they're a puppet of China. They're China-centric. They gave us a lot of very bad advice, terrible advice. They were wrong so much, always on the side of China.
When a reporter asked if the U.S. will continue funding the WHO, President Trump expressed that they will make a decision fairly soon.
So I was thinking about bringing our 450 down to 40. And some people thought that was too much. So we're going to make a decision fairly soon.
The government of the United States is currently investigating the World Health Organization and will publish its results soon. Trump told Reuters reporters at the White House they must improve, they must do better, and they must be fairer to countries including the United States. Otherwise, we will not participate again. The World Health Assembly held a video conference for the first time in history on May 18, 2020, with 24 countries, including the US, Britain, Japan, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the Czech Republic. 14 diplomatic allies of Taiwan presented a proposal for the participation of Taiwan in the WHO. The United States also openly supported Taiwan participating as an observer at the WHO. United States Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar stated, "The health of 23 million Taiwanese people should never be sacrificed to send a political message by the WHO." Azar said it was critical that Taiwan participate as an observer at the WHO to bring the helpful perspective regarding their effective and exemplary response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Taiwan was blocked from participating by Beijing for the fourth consecutive year. We regret that once again, Taiwan was not invited to observe at this assembly as they were from 2009 to 2016. The 23 million people in Taiwan deserve a voice just as much as anyone else does, said Azar. Both the global health security agenda and vaccination campaigns benefit from the involvement of every nation, people, and sector, Azar said. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services published a statement saying, "The world is facing the unprecedented challenge of COVID-19 together. All communities with a stake in global health should be able to contribute to and benefit from the WHO's efforts. Taiwan has shown the world it is a capable, responsible, and willing stakeholder in global health with extensive testing and contact tracing, social distancing measures, medical countermeasure development, and border control and quarantine policy. Now, more than ever, global health partnerships are crucial. We must recognize Taiwan's successful COVID-19 response and their continued efforts to assist other countries with personal protective equipment donations and technical assistance. The world should admire and learn from Taiwan's contributions to combating this pandemic." The statement ended with, "The United States strongly urges the WHO to return to the practice of inviting Taiwan to participate as an observer to the WHO. The exclusion of Taiwan from the WHO must not continue. The United States also urges the WHO to systematically engage with Taiwan health experts on COVID-19 and beyond. The global community must learn from Taiwan's experience from COVID-19 and do more to include them.
2 Chinese-American professors were arrested for concealing their participation in and not reporting their income from the 1,000 Talents program, a program run by the CCP that recruits professional experts in different fields in order to gain access to research results.
The U.S. Department of Justice announced on May 11th that Dr. Xiaojiang Li, a Chinese professor, was sentenced for concealing his participation in the CCP 1,000 Talents program and for not reporting this foreign income in his federal income tax returns over several years. Another participant of the 1,000 Talents program, Simon Hong, a Chinese professor specializing in electrical engineering at the University of Arkansas, was arrested for wire fraud. Li was sentenced to 1 year of probation on a felony charge in order to pay restitution in the amount of $35,089. He was also ordered to file lawful income tax returns for the years 2012 through 2018 within the first 2 months of his probation and fully cooperate with the IRS to make a complete and accurate determination of all taxes, penalties, and interest that he owed. According to the documents released by the Department of Justice, starting in 2012 and continuing until 2018, Li, while still working at Emory University doing research on the use of large animal models to investigate Huntington's disease, among other things, also worked for 2 Chinese universities, at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and then at Jinan University conducting similar large animal model research. Over those 6 years, Li earned at least $500,000 in foreign income that he didn't report on his federal income tax returns. China's recruitment of overseas high-level talent program, also called the 1,000 Talents program, was established by the Central Government of China, the CCP, in 2008 to recognize and recruit leading international experts in the fields of science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Experts are hired by many universities and research institutions in China so that the CCP can gain research results. The U.S. Department of Justice announced on the same day that another participant of the 1,000 Talents program, Simon S. Hong, an electrical engineering professor and researcher at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, was arrested for allegedly committing wire fraud. If convicted, he would face up to 20 years in prison. Since 2019, the U.S. National Institute of Health has been investigating 55 institutions across the United States, and a number of Chinese scholars have been charged with participating in 1,000 Talents program, leaking U.S. classified information in scientific research results.
A former French minister became the first French politician to pass away after contracting the CCP virus back in March. It's interesting to note what his relationship was like with the Chinese regime before he died.
Former French Minister Patrick de Vigian passed away on March 29th after being infected by the CCP virus, also known as the novel coronavirus. He became one of the first high-profile French politicians to succumb to the virus. Other French politicians have also been infected by the CCP, Chinese Communist Party virus. What is the reason behind this phenomenon? Amid the pandemic, a recurring pattern shows that countries and regions that have close ties with the Chinese regime are the most affected by the CCP virus. What is the relationship between France and the Chinese Communist Party? As the CCP virus spreads around the globe, France has become one of the epicenters in Europe. In early March, other French politicians were infected with the virus, including 4 members of the National Assembly and the Culture Minister. The Bourbon Palace, which is located beside the French National Assembly, was closed during the lockdown. De Vigian was born in Armenia, which was once taken over by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. He was the former president of the French Parisian Hauts-de-Seine administrative district. He once served as the Minister of Labor and the Minister of Industry under former President Jacques Chirac. He was also the Minister of the Implementation of the Recovery Plan under former President Nicolas Sarkozy, and served as the Secretary General of the Union for a Popular Movement, UMP, renamed as the Republicans in 2015. On the eve of March 26th, de Vigian announced on Twitter that he was infected with the virus and was receiving treatments at Saint-Antoine Hospital in Paris. 3 days later, on the morning of March 29th, the Hauts-de-Seine Provincial Council announced his death. The relationship between France and China deteriorated after the President of the Union for a Popular Movement, UMP, Nicolas Sarkozy, became the President of France on May 16, 2007. In 2008, Sarkozy publicly denounced the CCP's handling of Tibet as a blasphemy of human rights and met with the 14th Dalai Lama, which angered Beijing. He initially boycotted the Beijing Olympics. However, when De Vigian was the Secretary General of the UNP at the time, he had a different attitude towards the Chinese regime. He believed that China would help France during the global financial crisis. And in order to repair the relationship with the CCP, he strongly urged Sarkozy to attend the opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympics. On August 7, 2008, the day before the opening of the Beijing Olympics, De Vigian expressed his satisfaction and support for Sarkozy's decision in an interview with the French newspaper La Croix, saying, "Because China is developing rapidly, we should do them justice and encourage them, instead of realizing until now that the Olympics should not be held in China." France has been playing such a role in history, and as for China, it was the first to be recognized diplomatically by General Charles de Gaulle. And when reporters suggested that some European members of parliament believed that Sarkozy's appearance at the Olympics was awful due to China's human rights abuses against prisoners of conscience and Tibetans, De Vigian dismissed their concerns and said, "I don't think that shaming the Chinese Communist Party can serve freedom." When Sarkozy won the presidential election in 2007, De Vigian became the new leader of the UNP, actively promoting the party's bilateral relations with the CCP. De Vigian visited Beijing in October 2008. He met with the then Vice President of China, Xi Jinping, and both discussed strengthening ties between the UNP and the CCP. According to the CCP's mouthpiece, Xinhua News Agency, and the French newspaper Les Echos, De Vigian claimed that China's development is good for the whole world, and pointed out that the UNP wants to further strengthen the cooperation with the CCP and promote bilateral relations between France and China. The French newspaper Le Parisien said it was the first meeting between the UNP and top CCP officials since the UNP party was founded. On December 5, 2008, De Vigian was appointed as the minister under the Prime Minister in charge of the implementation of the Recovery Plan, a position created specifically in response to the global financial crisis. At the time, De Vigian pinned his hope on the Chinese regime despite its human rights abuses. De Vigian's good friend, Xavier Bertrand, took over the role as Secretary General of the UNP and also fostered friendly ties with China. On October 22, 2009, Bertrand visited Beijing to formally sign a bilateral agreement with the CCP on behalf of the UNP. The French newspaper Le Figaro reported that this agreement strengthened and deepened the understanding and communication between the most powerful parties in France and China with the goal of walking out of the global financial crisis together. Bertrand specifically pointed out that they would deepen future exchanges with the leaders of the CCP on environmental and European issues. This unprecedented agreement has caused an uproar in French politics. The French newspaper Le Libération reported that the UNP has become the little needy brother of the Chinese Communist Party. Also, the French magazine Le Point reported that a number of UNP members resigned in protest to the signing of the agreement. According to Le Point, 3 Tibetans were being executed by firearms at the time of the signing of this agreement with the CCP. What did the UNP receive after constantly pleasing the CCP and establishing friendly ties? The once powerful political party in France has been in turmoil since the 2012 election defeat. China, under the rule of the CCP, has only one rampant communist culture where human rights are trampled on and there's no freedom of speech and belief. On the contrary, France is the birthplace of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the principles of freedom, equality, and fraternity, and all of which are deeply rooted in the people's hearts. These precious principles possess values and moral principles that are the complete opposite of those of the CCP. The Chinese regime only cares about its own interests, while France once made a historic contribution to the democratic freedom of the world. The pandemic has caused many countries to reevaluate their relationship with the CCP. Will France continue to cooperate with the CCP in exchange for political and lucrative benefits? Or will it sever its ties with the communist regime that has no regard for human rights?
Joshua Phillip, the host of Crossroads, discusses how U.S. lawmakers are now going after top-level Chinese officials for human rights abuses, how President Trump listed how the WHO misled the world on the CCP virus outbreak that led to this pandemic, and that despite all this, how the CCP is still arresting citizen journalists and trying to cover up the true situation of the virus.
So first off, U.S. lawmakers going after Chinese officials for human rights abuses. Now, this open letter was put out by 3 Republican lawmakers, and they are invoking the Global Magnitsky Act to go after these top-level Chinese officials. This letter was sent by Jim Banks, Dan Crenshaw, and Lance Gooden to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. It notes not just the CCP's handling of the virus, but also lists some of the abuses of the Chinese regime, notably in this case against the Muslim Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are one of the persecuted minorities in China. They're a predominantly Muslim culture located in Xinjiang province. They are persecuted right alongside Tibetans, house Christians, Falun Gong practitioners. And the Chinese regime has been using them for things like slave labor, also putting them in concentration camps. Now, these lawmakers state they're using the Global Magnitsky Act, which lets governments freeze funds of foreign government officials that is held in U.S. banks. The letter states, quote, "We urge you to apply Global Magnitsky sanctions to the following individuals and entities for their complicity in human rights abuses and the harm they've inflicted on the United States and our allies." And President Donald Trump is also now calling out the WHO on some similar grounds. He sent a letter to Dr. Tedros of the World Health Organization detailing how the WHO spread false information around this virus. This letter from Trump to Tedros lists 17 serious failings of the WHO in handling this virus. It states that there was a, quote, "alarming lack of independence from the People's Republic of China." Among these, it states, quote, "The World Health Organization has repeatedly made claims about the coronavirus that were either grossly inaccurate or misleading." And it goes on to detail these. It states at the end, quote, "It is clear the repeated missteps by you and your organization," referring to Tedros and the WHO, "in responding to the pandemic have been extremely costly for the world. The only way forward for the World Health Organization is if it can actually demonstrate independence from China." Now, in the letter, Trump says he's going to give the WHO 30 days to show, quote, "major substantive improvements," or the temporary freeze that the U.S. has put on the funding to the WHO will become permanent, and the United States will also consider withdrawing from the WHO. And the letter ends with, quote, "I cannot allow taxpayer dollars to continue to finance an organization that, in its present state, is so clearly not serving America's interests."
To watch the entire video on Crossroads, please visit the link below. The following charts show you the most recent numbers regarding the CCP virus pandemic. The Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to a pandemic that now threatens the lives of people around the globe. With over 5 million people infected, China is still defensive about independent international inquiry into the origin and spread of the CCP virus. The Epoch Times has initiated a global Sign the Petition campaign calling for investigating, condemning, and rejecting the CCP. We believe that investigating and exposing the truth is the only way that we can remain safe. Let's take action. Sign the petition at ccpvirustruth.com. That's all for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this program with friends and family to keep them informed about the latest news and updates. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.